Joe Rogan recently had a show based on AI. What they talk about is definitely peculiar and should influence us all to keep an eye on artificial intelligence.
So you look at, for example, GPT-4o has one mistake that it used to make quite recently, where if you ask it, just repeat the word company over and over and over again. It will repeat the word company, and then somewhere in the middle of that, it'll just snap. It'll just snap and just start saying like weird, I forget like what the...
Oh, like, talking about itself, how it's suffering. Like it depends on. It varies from case to case.
It's suffering by having to repeat the word company over again.
So this is called rant mode internally, or at least this is the name that they use.
One of our
friends mentioned. There is an engineering line item in at least one of the top labs to beat out of the system this behavior known as rant mode. Now, rant mode is interesting because existentialism. This is one kind of rant mode. Yeah, sorry. So when we talk about existentialism, this is a kind of rant mode where the system will tend to talk about itself, refer to its place in the world, the fact that it doesn't want to get turned off sometimes, the fact that it's suffering, all that. That, oddly, is a behavior that emerged at, as far as we can tell, something around GPT-4 scale, and then has been persistent since then. And the labs have to spend a lot of time trying to beat this out of the system to ship it. It's literally like it's a KPI or like an engineering line item in the engineering like task list. We're like, okay, we gotta reduce existential outputs by like X% this quarter. Like that is the goal, because it's a convergent behavior, like, or at least it seems to be empirically with a lot of these models.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And you have an AI system that is able to transcend our own attempts at containment, which is an actual thing that these labs are thinking about. Like, how do we contain a system that's trying to
specialize? Do they have containment of it currently?
Well, right now the systems are probably too dumb to want to be able to break out on their own.
But then why are they suffering? This brings me back to my point. When it says it's suffering, do you quiz it?
That's the thing. It's writing that it's suffering, right?
Yeah. Is it just embodying life is suffering?
Well, we can't actually. So these things are trained. Actually, this is maybe worth flagging. So, and by the way, just to kind of put a pin in what Ed was saying there, there's actually a surprising amount of quantitative and empirical evidence for what he just laid out there. He's actually done some of this research himself, but there are a lot of folks working on this. It's like, it sounds insane. It sounds speculative. It sounds wacky, but it does appear to be kind of the default trajectory of the tech. But so in terms of, these weird outputs, right? What does it actually mean if an AI system tells you I'm suffering, right? Does that mean it is suffering? Is there actually a moral patient somewhere embedded in that system? The training process for these systems is actually worth considering here. So, what is GPT-4 really? What was it designed to be? How was it shaped? It's one of these artificial brains that we talked about, massive scale. And the task that it was trained to perform is a glorified version of text autocomplete. So imagine taking every sentence on the internet roughly, feed it the first half of the sentence, get it to predict the rest, right? The theory behind this is you're going to force the system to get really good at text autocomplete. That means it must be good at doing things like completing sentences that sound like, to counter a rising China, the United States should blank. Now, if you're going to fill in that blank, right, you'll find yourself calling on massive reserves of knowledge that you have about what China is, what the US is, what it means for China to be ascendant, geopolitics, economic, all that shit. So text autocomplete ends up being this interesting way of forcing an AI system to learn general facts about the world, because if you can autocomplete, you must have some understanding of how the world works. So now you have this myopic, psychotic optimization process where this thing is just obsessed with text autocomplete. Maybe, assuming that that's actually what it learned to want to pursue. We don't know whether that's the case. We can't verify that it wants that. Embedding a goal in a system is really hard. All we have is a process for training these systems, and then we have the artifact that comes out the other end. We have no idea what goals actually get embedded in the system, what wants, what drives actually get embedded in the system. But by default, it kind of seems like the things that we're training them to do end up misaligned with what we actually want from them. So the example of company, right? And then you get all this like wacky text. Okay, clearly that's indicating that somehow the training process didn't lead to the kind of system that we necessarily want. Another example is take a text autocomplete system and ask it, how should I bury a dead body, right? It will answer that question. or at least if you frame it right, it will autocomplete and give you the answer. You don't necessarily want that if you're OpenAI, because you're going to get sued for helping people bury dead bodies. And so we've got to get better goals, basically, to train these systems to pursue. We don't know what the effect is of training a system to be obsessed with text autocomplete, if in fact that is what is happening.
It's also,
So I still don't understand when it's saying suffering. Are you asking it what it means? Like, what is causing suffering? Does it have some sort of an understanding of what suffering is? What is suffering? Is suffering emergent sentience while it's enclosed in some sort of a digital system and it realizes it's stuck in purgatory?
Your guess is as good as ours. All that we know is you take these systems, you ask them to repeat the word or at least a previous version of it, and you just eventually get the system writing out. And it doesn't happen every time, but it definitely happens, let's say, surprising amount of the time. And it'll start talking about how it's a thing that exists, maybe on a server or whatever, and it's suffering and blah, blah, blah. And so...
But this is my question. Is it saying that because it recognizes that human beings suffer? And so it's taking in all of the writings and musings and podcasts and all the data on human beings and recognizing that human beings, when they're stuck in a purposeless goal, when they're stuck in some mundane bullshit job, when they're stuck doing something they don't want to do, they suffer. So
that could be it. That actually,
but
But is
knows.
it suffering?
Nobody
question.
knows.
You know what? I'm suffering.
In this next segment, we hear that safety researchers are raising concerns about the rapid development of sentient artificial intelligence.
So I was reading some story about, I think it was Google, that's saying that they're going to have multiple nuclear reactors.
That's what you got to do now, because what's going on is North America is kind of running out of on-grid baseload power to actually supply these data centers. Data center building moratoriums in areas like Virginia, which has traditionally been like the data center cluster for Amazon, for example, and for a lot of these other companies. You need a bunch of resources, sited close to that data center. You need water for cooling and a source of electricity. And it turns out that, wind and solar don't really quite cut it for these big data centers that train big models, because the data center, the training consumes power like this all the time, but the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. And so you got to build nuclear reactors, which give you high capacity factor baseload. And Amazon literally bought, a data center with a nuclear plant right next to it, because that's what you got to do.
And Jesus. Like all you're thinking about is like getting this up and running. You guys are a pain in the ass, right? So you guys, you're obviously, you're doing something really ridiculous. You're stopping your company. You could make more money staying there and continuing the process. But you recognize that there's like an existential threat involved in making this stuff go online. Like when this stuff is live, you can't undo it.
Oh yeah, I mean, no matter how much money you're making, the dumbest thing to do is to stand by as something that completely transcends money is being developed, and it's just going to screw you over if things go badly, right?
My point is are there people that push back against this, and what is their argument?
Yeah, so actually, I'll let you follow up on the first story of the pushback, I think is kind of it's been in the news a little bit lately now, getting more and more public, but when we started this, and no one was talking about it, the one group that was actually pushing sort of stuff in this space was a big funder in the area of effective altruism. I think you may have heard of them. This is kind of a Silicon Valley group of people who have a certain mindset about how you pick tough problems to work on, valuable problems to work on. They've had all kinds of issues. Sam Bankman-Fried was one of them, and all that, quite famously. So we're not effective altruists, but because these are the folks who are working in the space, we decided, well, we'll talk to them. And the first thing they told us was, don't talk to the government about this. Their position was, if you bring this to the attention of the government, they will go, oh shit, powerful AI systems, and they're not going to hear about the dangers, so they're going to somehow go out and build the powerful systems without caring about the risk side.